That's a good question, actually. I think what the most challenging thing was trying to define success.
Hmm.
And because when you get to a certain point, for me, I wasn't, you know, it wasn't like a conscious thing all the time. I was just keeping doing what I'd always been doing. But then other people outside, influences and all would say, "Oh, you must be really happy you've achieved all this success." And I'm still thinking about how I can't afford to put a new roof on my house or something. Because there's always going to be, I think Mary Chapin Carver told me this one time. She said, your problems aren't going to go away when you get successful. They're just going to be bigger problems.
Everyone on this podcast has been a sought-after get. Lucinda, however, was a 2-year effort. She was also a very personal one for me. I spent much of my teenage years listening to her deep, vulnerable voice float through my childhood home. And while my youth was not happy, these vestiges, such as her, always transport me back to the more joyful moments. And I hold a special place for her because of it. Consider additionally the turbulent inevitability of her success. It took many years of refining, failing, believing, and waiting for her to finally define her place in music on her own terms. Lucinda helps me believe in many things, but hearing her tell it is its own unique experience. Special shout out to Corin Tucker of Sleater Kinney as well, for her thoughtful and nuanced questions that help me bring out another side of Lucinda. I hope you enjoy. This is The Other Pod. Hello.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good.
I'm just going to fan out for just a minute and say I'm so excited. And your
That's,
management are the nicest people because I have hounded them for probably 2 years. And finally they were like, I think this is going to happen. And I'm just so
oh,
grateful for
good.
their patience. And I'm so excited to meet you. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to meet you, and you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Are you ready to begin?
Yeah,
You're doing all right? Where are you right now?
I'm at my home in Nashville.
Oh, it looks very warm. Is it nice? Is it summery?
It's it's kind of springy,
Yeah,
spring like.
cool. Well, I'm very,
It's trying to be spring, but some days it gets hotter than other days.
yeah.
But
Do you
it
like,
kind of it's pretty temperate right now.
and you like Nashville because you've been there a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we moved here I guess about 5 years ago.
But you were there earlier in your life as well, correct?
Right. I wasn't sure. I kind of went back and forth between Nashville and LA because
Yeah.
I like things about both those places,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, it's just such a thrill and like a bucket list item for me. So I am
oh,
really happy to get to spend some time with you. So thank you.
thank you. Is that your dog?
Yes, here she is.
Oh my God, he's so cute.
She's a good girl.
Uh,
I don't know what it is about a podcast, but I'll be left alone and then everyone comes out. So I just have to flow with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's adorable.
Thank you. Thank you. And you're hitting the road soon, yeah?
Yeah, going back out. We just had a little bit of
Yeah.
downtime.
And then you
So,
get to chill and reorder and then
you're right, exactly. Kind of regroup.
yeah.
It's the re-entry period is can be a challenge sometimes.
I'm sure. I'm sure. It's
Yeah.
I know you said you love life on the road, but I imagine there's a lot of stuff to maintain when you're constantly
Oh
in
yeah.
transition.
Definitely. Like doctor's appointments that you've been having to put off and
Yeah.
so like this whole last week has been doctor's appointments.
Oh my God, I'm
Just
so sorry.
check up things, not big, nothing to worry about, just stuff that you need to get done.
Yeah.
But I like taking it off. I like checking the boxes off.
And also feeling better, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to start at the beginning of everything, which is how do you initially hear a song? Is it a song? And how does instrumentation come to you?
Um, so when I'm writing a song, how do I
Is it a song or is it just thoughts? Like, how do you start to create anything and how do you make it music?
okay. Wow. Yeah. Um, well, it kind of depends sometimes. Like lately, I've been starting with the lyrics.
Mm,
And the advantage of that is I can do that anywhere, in the doctor's waiting room or, sitting at a bar or, something will come to me.
yeah.
Now, where that comes from, I'm not sure. It's been, everything's been said about that. The muse, where does the muse come from? I've heard other artists say, and I've felt this way before sometimes, that we're like a vehicle,
Yeah.
And there's some kind of muse in the cosmos that just filters through us, you know,
Yeah.
like
Well,
a gift.
what's interesting about that, though, especially in reading your book, which I didn't understand till I read your book, is the degree to which music really seems to have been your entire life. The focus, the love, the intensity of so much of your life was just that you wanted to be a musician and you wanted to make music. And
Yeah.
in seeing that again through your book, that really made that point so succinctly to me. How does that really take shape? Because it's almost like a given, right? Like your parents were these different people and you just fell into music and it was this unrelenting passion. And that's
Yeah.
where I wonder, like, is it just that's sort of the only reality you've ever known, or did that take shape in a certain way?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, part of that is, again, that it can be genetic or conditioning.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's kind of what you're saying, maybe. But I think with me, it was probably a little bit of both. Sorry, you're getting ready to say something.
No, no. I just think it's
Okay.
just so interesting because it's very rare to find people who have the level of passion that you had from the age that you had it at.
Right.
And also music is so sophisticated, right? Like that you're sort of paying two different overlords. You're paying your artistic integrity, but you're also paying some level of connection to the masses because that's the thing that allows you to have the career. And you've been
Right.
so interesting and so unusual in being able to bridge those things so well. Like I think there are very few artists that are so singular and yet have had your level of success, you know? And
Right.
so I'm curious, like, how did that form and percolate? And also, what was it about music from your, before you were even a teenager that sort of beckoned you?
Yeah. Um, Again, I think, I've got to give my dad
Yeah.
and my mother credit, because my mother wasn't, she played piano and sang and there was a piano in the house all the time. I didn't know how to play it. I regret now not having learned that instrument. But um, so there were some things in my surroundings that I think helped shape that, what you're talking about. Um, my mother's passion for music, my father's passion for poetry, creative writing. And, that was and I was very close to my father. We had a special bond, you know, and I looked up to him and,
What's
wanted to please him like
and
a
what's
lot of daughters. And so when I started working on things, writing songs and all that, I would show him stuff that I was doing, and he would give me feedback. And so it kind of started that way. And I just loved, there was part of it was the time. We have to look back at that. Radio was much more open at that time. And, you could turn on the radio and hear different kinds of music from the same station,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so my father loved Hank Williams. He had a passion for that. My mother loved the singers of that time, like Judy Garland, and musicians like Errol Garner. She had one of his albums, I remember. Actually, my mother introduced me to Joan Baez, the music of Joan Baez. She loved folk music. So, and my parents had separated and split up. So when I would go to visit my mother, she had Joan Baez and Leonard Cohen albums, and I would listen to them. And my father had racks and racks of books. So I was curious. The curiosity is a lot of what led me to what you're describing, I think. I loved the people who were passionate about those things. Like my dad's creative writing students who would come over to the house and hang out. And, they loved him and they became kind of part of the family. And they were a little bit older, so they were listening to Bob Dylan and, Leonard Cohen and all that kind of stuff. So I would learn from them. So I was just fortunate to have that environment around me,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think that rings very true. And I think also, which you talk about in the book extensively as well, is this atmosphere with your parents of some level of sort of chaos and hardship, but you at the same time always seem to have felt loved. And I
Yeah.
think like the enduring theme of your work is this sort of searching and this sadness, but also this idea of love. And
Yes.
and
You
that
get it. Thank God somebody finally gets me.
well,
I
I think,
mean, because I've been told
mm,
especially when I was first starting out, as an artist and everything, and I was meeting with different business people, or when I would do a show on TV or something, and the producer would say, "Well, this happened one time." She said, I was going to do these two particular songs, and she said, "Those are really dark songs. It's not a good idea to do two dark songs in a row." That there was a show called, it was either the show or a band that was called Up With People. Oh yeah, one of the artists on the show. The show was, I don't know, it was some kind of TV entertainment show thing that they asked me to come on, and of course I hated that she said that. And I started getting that a lot from feedback, like my songs were too dark.
yeah.
Because they dealt with, like you just said, the sadness and the searching and the whatever, real life,
Yeah. But I
which is
think,
what my father wrote about in his poetry.
and I think that seems to be also part of your mother is when I read your understanding of her, especially because what happened to her is so heartbreaking, and
Yeah,
it's like you see this woman sort of tangled in circumstances she couldn't control and
right,
then the fallout of it that she can't manage. But you also feel very much that she loves you and your father too, with the moving from place to place to place to place and the following of his dream with like no judgment. But that's hard for a little kid.
right.
That's a lot of stuff to figure out.
It is.
And they still held a lot of love for you. And when I read all that about your life, I was like, oh, that's so much of the music, right?
Right.
Is the love and the uncertainty and the fear and the loss and I think that's what's so beautiful about your work and I think that's why people respond so much to it.
God, you are brilliant. I'm serious. You don't know what it's like to finally be understood in this kind of microcosm, that you're putting it in. It's
It's
just,
funny because it seems so apparent, right? Because I mean, your book is so, it feels so much like how I imagined you would feel. And you're so honest about so many things. And there's so much pain in it, you know? And then I just, and I feel like, again, you're such an enigma because you do all of these different things. But what's so, again, it's this sort of beautiful suffering. And I was like, God, this is where it started and it's what gave birth to it. And then
wow.
she's made
That,
it her own.
that's a great line right there. Beautiful suffering.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
love that.
Thank you. Well, you do it. I just get to listen to it, but it's so interesting. And I think, it gives all of us a little bit of hope, right? That like you had all these people say, you shouldn't do this and you didn't. But I also wonder what kept you saying, fuck them. I'm going to do my thing and I'm not going to bow down because I'm sure there must have been money on the table. There must have been opportunities on the table and you didn't succumb to any of that. Like,
Yeah.
how? How did you not give in?
I think that it's in my blood, maybe. You know,
Okay.
again, my father was very much like that.
Yeah.
When I was working on my book, I was going, as most people would do when they're writing their memoirs. I found these things that my dad had left behind, that, letters and things like that. And there was an incident that it just tickled me. When I guess I must have been in grade school or something, and the teacher had sent home the name of a book that the students were supposed to read.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what grade, again, elementary or junior high, maybe, or something. My dad didn't approve of the book, not as most parents, like it had bad words in it or something. It was just a badly written book.
Mm.
And he decided, he took the time and effort to write, compose a letter to the teacher as to why I didn't need to bother with reading this book, because it was basically crap. You know,
Okay.
that's him in a
Yeah.
nutshell.
Interesting.
And, and it wasn't because I went to him and said, I don't want to read this. He just saw the book. And, you know, it'd be like if one of my kids came home and said, I need to listen to this song by this artist, you know,
Yeah.
and it was like junk pop,
Yeah.
whatever. And I would want to say, wait, listen to this instead. This is good music. That is commercial
Yeah.
schlock,
Yeah.
whatever.
And
And so that's an
I like
example of
that spirit.
that spirit, that rebel spirit. And my dad was always telling me about his father, who was like, went through life with that same
Mhm.
spirit. My father's father was a Methodist preacher, and my dad told me one time, I called his parents, we called him Mima and Pippa,
Yeah.
and he said one time, honey, Pippa is a democratic socialist. Like, he wanted to make sure I knew that.
Which
And
which is
he
unusual
was,
for that position. That's an unusual kind of man.
yes.
Yeah.
And he and my grandmother they lived in Arkansas, and they helped. Well, he was involved in the farmers tenant, helping build a union for the southern tenant farmers in Arkansas, because they wouldn't be paid, they weren't fairly treated. And he got involved in that. They would have meetings at his house and all that, you know. And my mother, during the Vietnam moratorium, the moratorium over the Vietnam War, my grandmother, my dad's mother, wore a black armband.
Mm.
That's how you showed your
Right.
support.
Right.
She went to the grocery store to get some groceries, and she ran into somebody she knew who said, "Oh my, did you lose someone in your family?" Or,
Yeah.
and my grandmother said, Mama said, "Oh yes, hundreds and hundreds and thousands."
Interesting. So this goes way back.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's cool. It's a hard spirit to have though. You pay a price for it. The
hmm
world is not in favor of that a lot of the time, but it's
no,
worth it,
right.
you know. Speaking of which, how did you start playing with the guitar? And do you remember writing your first song? What was your first song?
Okay. The beginning of my guitar lessons came about as a result of one of my dad's writing buddies had left a guitar at the house after, they'd probably been sitting around drinking Jack Daniels or something. And this guitar was just beat up, it had a hole in it, I think, or something. And I just picked it up out of curiosity, and I probably started messing around on it. And my dad could see that I was
Into it.
interested. So he bought me a silver tone guitar from Sears. That was my first guitar. And then I took guitar lessons from a guy who my dad was teaching at, this was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And he was teaching at LSU, teaching creative writing. There was a student of his who had a rock band, and then on the side he gave guitar lessons. So he would come over to the house like once a week and give me a guitar lesson. And the way he taught was really, really worked for me with me. It worked for me the way he taught, because instead of just, giving me all these scales to do, he would ask me what song I was interested in learning. And I would pick a song like Puff the Magic Dragon or something, you know, because that's the age I was, like 12.
Yeah.
And I was really into Peter, Paul, and Mary at the time.
Mm.
And so he would show me that particular song, the chords and the finger picking techniques to go with it. And I would work on, then he would leave. And while he was between that and the next lesson, I would just practice that particular song. And that way I learned chords and picking and built up a little repertoire of songs, which is more interesting to me to do it like that than just kind of, strumming and playing a bunch of chords and over and over again.
Well, you had the
So,
music off the bat rather than all the little steps to get there.
yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
Because that can be tiresome and tedious
Yeah.
for kids, I think, when they're learning an instrument.
Yeah.
It's much more fun to learn through the songs, I think.
And gratifying
Yes.
because you have it, you've got a song.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
And so my first song, it's kind of, it was called The Wind Blows.
okay. Yeah.
Now we all know The Wind Blows,
Yeah.
okay, but it had this little melody. Like, I remember at the time there were these songs on the radio that had these just really pretty melodies.
Yeah.
Like there was one called Today.
Mm.
Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine. There are all these lyrics like that my dad hated. And, like drink the poet's wine and all
Mm.
this. He used to tell me to refrain from using cliched lines like, the stars in your eyes and, you know, the moon in the sky and the poet's wine and all this. So it was like he was almost like a mentor for me, you know.
And he had a very strong writing style on his own. And I'm wondering if you felt oppositional to that, or if you really tried to not only embrace his feedback, but did his style imprint on you? Or did you very much want to do something separate and divorced from the way that he wrote?
I didn't really think about that at all, actually, you know. Um, I wasn't, honestly, I wasn't really a big reader of poetry at that time.
Sure.
You know, I was listening. What the turning point came when I heard Bob Dylan
Hmm.
for the first time. And that would have been around this same time, in 1965. And
Okay.
it was his Highway 61 Revisited album that blew my 12-year-old mind. I wasn't sure what all the lyrics meant, but it spoke to me somehow, you know. So I remember feeling like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I've got to raise the bar. And I set the bar right there.
Yeah.
And, you know, his music really changed my life.
Well, I'm gonna ask, I wanted to ask this question later, but since we have this lovely segue, you're playing with him now, and I just have to
Yes.
wonder, what is that? Because you reference him so many times in the book, and it's obvious he's had a huge impact on you.
Yeah.
How do you even develop, like, do you change your set list? Do you change your performance style? Like, knowing he's there watching you, how does that
Right.
impact a Lucinda show now?
I try not to get nervous. I just approach it the way I would all my other shows because, you know, the important thing is to be myself and be relaxed on stage. And, you know, it's about my audience. And, you know, I brought that up actually to my band at one point. I said, should we do a Bob Dylan song when we open up for Bob? And they all said without hesitation, no, that would be really dumb, you know. And I said, I figured that. I wanted to know what y'all thought. I'm glad I brought it up. So,
Yeah.
you know, some people might think, oh, that would be cool to, you know, as an homage to Bob. But no.
Does it tickle you at all to be like, I am now playing with this man? I mean, does that feel, is that a kind
Yes.
of achievement?
Oh yeah, God, you know, I think about it all the time. Like I usually mostly think I wish my dad was here to watch my achievements and,
Yeah.
you know, be able to celebrate them with me, you know. So I
I,
get kind of sad about that
yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Do you do you ever feel like there's something beyond where we are? Like, is there any sort of idea like maybe there's just a little spirit, little something that like they can restore that a little bit, or when we're dead, we're gone and there's just nothing else that can happen?
No, I definitely believe in that the spirit world.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, none of us know, but why not? I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that people didn't used to believe in that, you know, were realities
Yeah.
100 years ago, you know.
And you two had such an intense bond, I don't know.
Yeah,
There's some vestige somewhere. I don't know where, but there's something somewhere
me
floating
too.
around, you know?
Yeah, I think
So
so too.
I mean, I like that. So your early years in Texas and elsewhere, but I would love to know your first live performance. What was that like? And with that, what is your interplay with the audience like then? And what is your interplay with the audience like now? Because you talk about sometimes feeling like an imposter, especially because you had success not late in life, but later, right? Where all of a sudden, finally, everything came together and you had this massive amount of success that carried. And I wonder, does the audience feed you, or is it a show? And then also the first time you stepped up on stage and these people are watching you, like in a big way, not a,
Right.
two people at a dive bar, but like a substantial thing. What was that like for you?
Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to remember the very first show, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I know a period of time when I first started, you know, playing in front of an audience and everything. We moved to Mexico City for a year because my dad was awarded a grant to go and
Yeah.
And that happened a few different times. It took us to Santiago, Chile in 1963, and then Mexico City in 1970, both of which were huge inspirations for me. And I grew to appreciate and love the Hispanic culture and still do. And anyway, when we were in Mexico that year, before that, we had been living in New Orleans. My mother had befriended this folk musician at the Unitarian Church where we went because my dad couldn't find another church that he could, you know, abide by. So we went to the Unitarian Church. There was a guy there who was going there, and they always had these, you know, gatherings with folk songs and all of that, you know. So his name was Clark Jones. I mentioned him in the book. And he was kind of like a Pete Seeger type guy. He played guitar, banjo, auto harp, dulcimer, all the folk instruments, had a really pleasing voice and knew like every folk song ever written. And he started coming over to the house, and he and I would sit around and play songs and stuff. And so we were doing that one evening at our house in Mexico City, and my dad had a friend over who worked for the State Department. And they said all of a sudden, after Clark and I sang a couple of songs, the subject came up of, wouldn't it be great if Clark, I went by Cindy back then, if Clark and Cindy could go around to different colleges and high schools in Mexico and give little concerts, and it would, at the idea of being that, you know, sort of like an ambassadorship or something, you know, help the unification between the US and Mexico. And, you know, and I said, yes, of course, I'd love to do that. So Clark had his car, he would drive, I would sit in the front seat with him, and we had this whole little regional trip mapped out. We would go play these little shows at the different colleges, and some were just these auditoriums, and nobody knew who we were, but they thought we were famous US folk singers, you know. And at that time, I hadn't really started writing yet and doing my own songs. So we were doing Bob Dylan songs, Peter, Paul and Mary, Joan Baez. Clark did a lot of traditional folk songs. And, you know, people loved it. I've still got some posters and things like that from that little period of time. And so that was a pretty great experience for me. And I'd already kind of gotten bit by the bug, you know, the stage bug, that feeling, which is like no other, of being on a stage and singing, and kind of the rush, you know, that you get from doing that with people sitting out there in front of you.
Yeah.
I loved that feeling. So now I've been bit by the stage bug.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
You know.
Is it the love off the audience? Is it the admiration? Is it that they're listening? Like, can you pinpoint what it is that fuels that exchange for you?
I think, I mean, as I know how now I know what that would be. I think back then it was probably the approval.
Okay.
And the love and the approval that I was feeling. And then, you know, as I got older into my 20s and 30s, I remember singing, and, you know, people would come up to me and kind of pat me on the head or the shoulder and say, "You're really good." They could hear something in there, it just hadn't been perfected yet, you know, and they would say things like, you're really good. You just need to work on your stage presence.
Mm, okay.
And I
Interesting.
wasn't sure what they meant at first. I was like, stage presence?
Yeah.
But then I learned what they meant because I was so shy
Mm,
and I wouldn't talk. I was too shy to talk to the audience. And, you know, and I didn't have it in me to be like a performer. That just wasn't in the cards. And I wasn't interested in that. I just wanted to go out like Joan and Bob and the other folk singers I admired. I mean, there were so many great ones at that time. Judy Collins, Gordon Lightfoot, Buffy St. Marie, you know, Donovan, who I loved. The songs were just so great. And they're present at that time. It was just the cool thing was just to be play it down a little, like we're black, all black, and have long hair, the whole thing.
yeah.
And that was what I wanted to, I identified with that image. And I was a rebel anyway. So, and I loved all the protest songs that they were singing at that time. And, you know, and as soon as I was in my teens, I started going to demonstrations and marches and all of that.
And it's interesting to hear you talk about this because at the same time, obviously just being a singer-songwriter was not the thing. You talk about this in the book too, like that everyone wanted to sort of put you in a box and be like, "Oh, you're this thing." And you're like, "Well, no, no, I'm not that thing. I'm actually this
Right.
other thing." And with that in mind, I think part of what distinguishes you so much is your voice. And it comes off as being just you, but I can't imagine it didn't take a lot of work to get your voice to be what it is. And I'm curious, how did your voice develop and how did you get the particular stylistic cadence that you have when you sing? Or is it really unstudied and it's just what comes out?
Yeah, it's unstudied. It's just what comes out.
Interesting. Okay.
So I look at it as a blessing.
Okay.
Um, for a while though, I was pushing my voice too hard because I hadn't learned the studied part of singing. And a lot of the times I wouldn't even have monitor speakers, so I could hear myself on stage. So I was pushing my voice and not in a good way, and ended up with nodes on my vocal cords, and which are kind of like calluses on your vocal cords from hitting together too hard. Like, yeah. So I had to quit singing and talk. I couldn't even talk for, I think it was like I couldn't talk for 6 weeks and I couldn't sing for 6 months or something because they wanted that was the only way for it to dissipate and soften.
Yeah.
It was to do that. And I did it. Actually went back to my dad's house and stayed with my dad and my stepmom while I was convalescing, sort of. But it was really a blessing in disguise because it forced me to pay more attention to the care of my voice. And I did take a few voice lessons, but not to learn how to sing, just to learn what not to do, like scream instead of singing.
That's an
So,
unfortunately large part of life seems to be learning what not to do.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so anyway, that helped me learn how to not lose my voice, you know, and that's when I kind of started, I guess my vocal style started kind of finding itself, but I never thought consciously about what I was doing when I was singing. It was just more whatever came out.
I mean, I love
And
that honestly because part of me thought maybe you'd say, well, yes, and I do all these things where I figure out how I'm going to move through the song and I have all these sort of premonitions, but it's kind of lovely that it really is just the moment with you. And it
yeah,
makes a lot of sense, honestly.
yeah, everything was pretty organic with me, as I went through all of that.
Yeah.
So,
You can feel it,
yeah,
you feel it on the albums, I think. And
That's great.
I think you do. I hope this
Well,
isn't.
that's all that matters because you're the queen now of
I
what
do
is
it.
your what do you do exactly?
So I'm a photographer, and so I take a lot of pictures for a living. So I do music and advertising and editorial and all sorts of things. But I was lucky that I had this podcast I wanted to do, and I was like, "Who's everyone I want to talk to?" And for some reason, I meet different people on jobs a lot of times. But then I wanted to do this, and I was like, "Will people do this?" And then we're 4 years in and people keep showing up who I've always wanted to talk to and
Yeah.
photograph. And I did tell Jim, if you ever need a picture, please call me
Okay.
because I will be there. But I just wanted to talk and interact with the people who I think have made the world different, you know?
Yeah.
And I've been lucky because I get to and I get to ask them all these creative questions that I feel
I
like
love
hopefully
that.
you haven't been
Yeah.
asked before.
I've had quite a bit of practice doing podcasts
You're
as
very
of
good.
late.
You're
It's
very good.
thank you.
Yeah. I hope this isn't a sad question, but I know you played a Gibson J45 guitar, and I know that you don't really play it now. I was
Yeah.
wondering, how did it change your musical expression once you stopped, and what
Yeah.
was it about that guitar that really was right for your expression?
Um, I just I love those guitars. It's hard to describe or explain. It's just a feeling when I'm holding it, how it sounds. It has it's like the volume wise, it's a good acoustic guitar. The neck is comfortable for me to play. That's a large part of,
Mhm.
choosing a guitar is some of them have wider necks, so it's harder for me to, wrap my hand around the neck.
Yeah.
The action, meaning, how far the strings are raised up from the
Mhm.
neck. So it checks all those boxes,
Yeah.
and it just has a nice, warm, full, big, full, warm sound.
Yeah.
So, and I think it was modeled after there was an original guitar from a long time ago, I think in the 50s, that this is what I was told, if I can remember the details. I think it was the Everly Brothers played this kind of guitar from the 50s or something. Because a lot of the companies are going back and looking at these vintage instruments and kind of reimagining them, which is really great, So, because then you also get the visual of a cool looking, older looking guitar.
And
So,
and with that in mind, when you stopped playing, how, did that change your musical approach? And if so, how?
well, I, I think I talk a lot about mixed blessings and blessing in disguise and all that, because this again, I think was one of those a little bit. Um, After I had my stroke and I just continued to go out and sing and everything, I couldn't play, but I had gathered together these great musicians and kind of reshaped and reformed the band that who were backing me up, and people started saying I sang better after my stroke than before. you know Something had shifted, I don't know, but so some of the guys in my band and I would sit around and talk about that, and a couple of them said, well, maybe it's because you're not playing guitar. It frees you up to, just concentrate on your singing. And I think that's is a large part of it, you know. So
And do,
that's all I can figure out.
did the guitar act as like a shield in any way or sort of a distraction? And is it different now being sort of really front and center with nothing in front of
Yeah.
you, did that change too, or that's not much of a difference?
Yeah, that changed a lot because I was it, I had a little anxiety at first about just going up there and, not having my guitar, which was kind of a security blanket, you know.
That
Um,
that makes a
but
lot of sense.
it forced me to, you know, work more on connecting with the audience, maybe, So in that way, it was a positive. I try to turn it into a positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, I think this new album it's different, right? And was it different doing that and not having your guitar pieces on it too,
Oh,
just even in
yeah.
the recording? Yeah.
Yeah. Really different. And I struggled with that a lot in the studio
Yeah.
because, you know, um, what I like to do when I go in and cut a song is bring the guys in, of course. Um, but I like to be able to just start off with me playing on guitar and then so they can hear my cadence and all of that, and then they can move in, and otherwise I've got to try to show them and explain it and then get one of the guys in the band because I've got two great guitar players, Doug Pettibone and Mark Ford. One of them will try to simulate my acoustic playing. But as they've said to me, nobody plays like I do,
Yeah.
which isn't to say that I'm better necessarily, but that I have my own unique
Yeah.
style of playing. So that in that regard, it made it really challenging.
Did it enrich the creative process at all, or it was just hard?
It was just hard. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And what I'm wondering too, because I talk about this on the pod a lot, is when you got that level of success, did you find, it doesn't seem like it did, but did you find that there was like an ego component you had to contend with? Or was there anything about yourself that you learned about your desires, about your idea of success, about what you wanted once you finally got that thing you had worked so hard to achieve?
Yeah. That's a good question, actually. I think what the most challenging thing was trying to define success.
Hmm.
And because when you get to a certain point, for me, I wasn't, you know, it wasn't like a conscious thing all the time. I was just keeping doing what I'd always been doing. But then other people outside, influences and all would say, "Oh, you must be really happy you've achieved all this success." And I'm still thinking about how I can't afford to put a new roof on my house or something. Because there's always going to be, I think Mary Chapin Carver told me this one time. She said, your problems aren't going to go away when you get successful. They're just going to be bigger problems, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, but of course I enjoyed, that bit of nominal success. I mean, I certainly could afford to do things I couldn't afford to do before. Um, it opened doors that had been closed before. In that regard, that was probably the most positive thing.
Which is
Like
not
grant,
insignificant. Those are big things to be able to
yeah,
live, and
that's a
have
really big.
opportunity.
Yeah, your lifestyle is a big part of it because, you know, it's a drag to have to go through each day feeling like, you don't have enough money to pay for this or that or the other. Your car's falling apart. You can't afford to get it fixed or something like that. I've been through all that stuff and I really don't care to go through it again. I mean, I think I read one time where Joni Mitchell said when she first felt the gift of success, she said she wanted to be part of her being successful was being able to buy some really nice clothes.
Yeah.
And that might sound trivial to some people and, you know, um, not, you know, enough of an aesthetic or something, but I read that and I totally got it, you know. Um, I thought she was brave actually for saying that.
Yeah. Well, also it's small things, but it makes you feel that your life is in a different place, right? And that has
Yeah,
merit and meaning.
exactly. Yeah.
I hear that. And so with that, with the success question in mind, your album Car Wheels on a Gravel Road goes to the Grammy Hall of Fame this year. Does that mean anything to you? And
Hell yes.
would you have chosen a different album?
No, I would have chosen that one
Okay.
because that was really the first album that I felt like, kind of pushed up the whole
Yeah.
thing, that a lot of people discovered me through that album. That was the album really that set me
Apart.
apart or, kind of said something about who I was. But the other one, there was another album though, that self-titled one that came out on Rough Trade. And I can't decide which one was the most informative as far as, you know, people knowing about me and all that. Because that album did that too.
Right.
That was the one, the self-titled Rough Trade album, I think, was the one that introduced me to a lot of the music critics and music journalists. And, they started writing about me more. And then Car Wheels, I think, kind of pushed it up to the next level a bit,
Yeah.
where, my name became more well known. And of course, it didn't hurt that Mary Chapin Carpenter recorded Passionate Kisses.
Yeah.
That's the thing that really, I have her to thank for opening a lot of doors with that.
Okay.
And it was interesting because she wanted it to be the first single off that album that it was on.
Yeah.
I think her album was Come On, that had Passionate Kisses on it. Her record company people said, no, we don't want that to be the first single because it's not country enough.
Mm.
And she said, screw that. I want it to be the first single. I've been playing it live. My fans love it. So they conceded, and it came out as the first single on her album and then won a Grammy for Country Song of the Year after they said it wasn't country enough. And
Oh,
it's not country, but who cares? She was being marketed as a country artist at the time. And therein lies the beginning of the confusion regarding genres and boxes and all of that.
yeah.
Is it country? Is it not? I almost literally fell in the cracks between country and rock, you know, because I was too rock for country and too country for rock, meaning radio, the bins, when you go into a record store, they need to know where to put your album, which bin to put it in. I mean, that's how significant they think genres are, you know. It all has to do with the marketing people at the label.
Yeah.
They get nervous about it. They don't know how to promote you. They don't know, they need a tag to stick on everything.
Well, honestly, they need to make you digestible, right? And I think that's what's so anomalous about you is that you weren't, and somehow the world found you anyways. And like that, I think is the great gift of your career. Like you have wonderful work, but somehow you manage to, bob and weave and still find the people who
Yeah.
really love your work.
Well, I have to give credit to whoever came up with the idea of Americana because they created a genre around the cracks between country and rock, which was Americana.
Yeah.
So then they were able to kind of slip me in there and breathe a sigh of relief. Americana.
Yeah.
Now we don't have to worry about whether to put her in country or rock. We can just put her safely in this little slot, So
I'm glad marketing served some good purpose in the end.
Yeah, I guess so.
you know.
Yeah. Well,
You
that's
said,
when I was sorry. I was on lot. I was just going to give credit to the Lost Highway label run by Luke Lewis because he had a vision about that and loved my music and understood the challenge that was had been happening. And he helped create Lost Highway and ran that label for a long time. So it was a home for me for a while. Yeah,
and it needed it at that point, right? And then
right.
once you get the lift, you can define your own parameters.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I love that. You also said in an interview, I believe, all I can do is write about my feelings and the world's feelings. And I wonder, what are the world's feelings right now and how do they influence your own?
Um, well, it sounds like you're thinking of the new album with those songs like World's Gone Wrong and all that. Not to be confused with Bob Dylan's album World Gone Wrong.
Yeah. Yes.
I was concerned about that he was going to see that and get mad. But then I had to keep telling myself, okay, this is worlds apostrophe S.
Yes.
His is world, no apostrophe S.
Yes.
So, and every time I would bring it up, somebody would say, do you realize how many things Bob has taken from other
Yeah.
songs that written by other people and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
So he always gets accused of that.
And do you
Um,
think, and so to that point, do you, it seems like where the world is right now has had an enormous impact on you.
oh yeah, because from an early age, I developed a global view of the world, you know, and we're all in this together. No man is an island or woman. No man or woman is an island, So that's my perception. So of course I'm going to be with all that's. A lot of those songs are written during, Trump's first go at it, and it was just, you know, a daily test of trying to maintain against this madness that was apparent on TV and the paper, everywhere you looked, everything you listened to. It was pervasive in your face constantly. How could you, you know? I have people ask a lot about the songs on the new record, and it varies. It's interesting. I thought when it came out, people would say, thank God somebody finally wrote about this insanity, but instead I get questions like one woman, I think it was an interview with Australia, and she was almost, I could tell she was afraid to ask me. She said, so is this particular song about Donald Trump? Like I felt like saying, hello, yes. I mean, have you been living under a rock?
Yeah.
They're all about him.
Yeah.
I mean, he instigated it all, you know. And I remember feeling really happy when I read about No King's Day marches. That because I remember thinking, you know, where are the leaders in the left wing movement of today? Um, where are they? Where's the movement?
Yeah.
Hello, we need to be organized and out there marching and demonstrating. There's a lot to fight against and a lot to be angry about. And it wasn't really happening. Nothing was happening until the marches in Portland. That's when I really got my hopes up. And we were there, we played a show there during that time in Portland. And so, of course, the set list was all the songs on the new record. And I remember walking up on stage and I said to the audience, okay, I've come armed and loaded, you know,
Yeah.
and they all cheered because they knew what I was talking about. And then, we jumped into those songs and the people loved it. They felt there was joy in the room. And I loved that feeling that of coming together. And, there's nothing quite like being with people of like minds, holding hands or just standing next to people you don't necessarily know personally, but you're all there for a reason, and singing a song like We Shall Overcome. There's nothing like that. And I remember that feeling from back in the day, and I wanted to have that again. I wanted to feel that again. Like we're working towards something together and we're going to make a change, that sort of thing. It might sound corny now to some people, but, that I felt like that's what was missing. And that's what brought these songs on.
Right. Would you have released the album if he wasn't president again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's still a body of people like that, they're still out there. I did an interview yesterday with the Boston Globe. Yeah. And she was asking me, what do you want people to take away from the album? And I said, not to be complacent and just pay attention.
I think you want people to act. I think that's a part of what the album's asking for. You're asking people to act.
Yeah, act. Because there's this kind of apathy developed at some point. I don't know I do know where it came from, but it's horrible. There's nothing worse to me than apathy. And people shrugging their shoulders and saying, like even not voting, because what difference does it make? I mean, my God, look at other countries, read about this stuff, pay attention, read, listen to, or they'll say, but I hate politics. It's not about politics. It's about human beings and, the rights that people deserve. Living day to day. Shouldn't be a privilege to have health insurance or a roof over your head. That's a right that every human deserves.
Yeah. No,
see, and that's where the socialism comes in.
I knew it was there. I knew it was there.
And am I willing to pay my part? Hell yeah. I feel like if people make over a certain amount, just chip in a little. Come on. Yeah. I've talked to people who are so scared of any word that ends in ism, like, ooh, you're a socialist. That means that's the same as communism and Marxism or, whatever. Yeah. No, God, go look it up.
Or just being a human.
Don't even get me started on this. I'm like, I'm sorry, people, but this is I'm passionate about this. Yeah. Just like I used to be. I haven't changed. Yeah. I was very idealistic always, and I still am. And I get accused of that too. You're too idealistic,
I don't think there is such a thing.
Yeah.
To be too idealistic. Why not?
You. See? You get it.
We definitely vibe. You and I we're on a similar wavelength over here. Yeah. Because
I feel like I'm not too idealistic. What I do is I believe in the human spirit. And I have a trust and a belief that people are inherently good, And I think it's more about just educating people more, maybe, about all of these things, because they hear it from their relatives or neighbors or whatever. The Joe, whoever down the street, who drives a truck for a living, hates liberals. So he tells his buddy, they sit at a bar and drink beer, talk about, this stupid left-wing liberals, blah, blah, blah. When, they don't, it's like a disease or something. And it passes from one to the other to the other.
But I think there's also a fundamental lack, right? Like there's a feeling that you're lacking something, and that lacking breeds this anger and this resentment. And I think if
Yeah,
we could all remember, like everyone's trying to get by, everyone's
right.
trying to live, and the compassion that should be commensurate with that, you know?
You just mentioned what I think is the key word, compassion. One of my favorite poems of my dad's is called Compassion. And took the lyrics and turned it into a song, which I do a lot of times in my shows. And it's just the line that resonates with me from that poem is he talks about being compassionate because you don't know what somebody else is going through. Don't just assume. And the line is, who knows what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Isn't it?
It's beautiful.
And it just says everything,
Yeah.
so
I love that you care and I love that you have fire about it because I feel like that again, that's the problem is there's not a lot of
it
fire left.
is. There's not a lot of fire, and they talk in terms of what difference is it going to make, or what can we do about it, or what can I do about it, you know,
How
which
about
is,
all the difference? You can make all the difference.
yeah. And I mean, because individual hope can do a lot,
Yes.
because that can become, crowd hope.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I think people just get exasperated, which I completely understand. We're all exasperated. And there is that feeling of what's the point? Nothing does any good. But I think it does a lot of good, and even if it's just on a personal terms, because eventually that's going to trickle through and affect other things. So,
Well, also, I think we all got to try harder. It's not like you try at 10% and you're like, ah, it didn't work. It's like, no, now I'm going to
yeah,
go to 20, then I'm going to go to 30,
right.
you know?
And that's why I think, people in groups like protesting and marching is so important, because you feed off of each other, and that grows, and that everything is connected,
I agree.
and that grows and blossoms and, you know, affects the entire country eventually, the way it did before. I'm not going to mention that decade, the 60s, because then people go, oh God, here she goes talking about the old 60s days,
Yeah.
you know. But guess what? Unless you were there, you don't remember, you don't know what it was like, and it was great. So enough said.
Yes. So one weird question, I don't know what you're going to say to it, but you've been in it feels like a very positive relationship for a long time. And
Yeah,
I feel like so much of your life was searching for this.
right.
Once you got it, did that change your relationship to music? And if it did, how?
That's a great question. And I have a good answer for it. Well, first of all, I was concerned that I might not be able to write as well, because I'd gone through that before when I was not in the right relationships, and it kind of would dampen my creativity, or, I would blame it on that. But, and what happened, the funny thing was that when Tom and I became a couple, and when we got engaged and the word got out, people started in the press, they would ask me, are you still going to be able to write songs now? Because I was happy. They thought they bought that idea, that myth that, you know, you have to be miserable to create good art,
Yeah.
which opens up a whole nother probably podcast,
Yeah.
you know. And I had to explain to him, yes, I'm happy, but that doesn't mean I don't get disappointed, or I don't have moments of fear and frustration and anger and stuff. So at first I had to try to define my happiness to them. and try to convince them that, yes, I could still write good songs. At which point I started working on that. I started coming up with these, what I thought were great love songs, not sappy, you know, and that thrilled me and made me even happier that I was on a creative level. I felt like I was really doing some good stuff. And it reaffirmed the idea that you can be quote unquote happy and still, because that was always my kind of ideal. I would hear about these legendary loves, like F. Scott Fitzgerald and his love, and they would vitally creative, and it had this amazing romantic love that endured for however long, you know, and one would inspire the other and all of that. I used to think, is that possible? Can I find that as an artist? Can I find that love and still be the artist I want to be? And the answer, I thought it was yes. But then I kept getting that same question bounced up at me. Well, what about, are you going to still be able to write songs? I mean, my fans would ask about it, like they were concerned almost about, like, what happens now? What's going to happen to your songs? You know, so.
Yeah. And do you find that it changed? I mean, yes, you still are able to write wonderful songs and you still are able to keep this career going, but I wonder, does the music complete you in a different way? Is it, because I imagine it was sort of the main relationship for a long time, and now you have this other thing. Does the music change in your sphere where it exists and what it does for you?
No,
Okay.
because if it did, then I would be concerned,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
And Tom ended up becoming my manager. And so, that immediately put the relationship on a whole nother wavelength, So, and then we started working on songs together,
That's cool.
which was this kind of organic process. I never would have thought, in a million years that I would be writing with my husband.
Yeah.
And it just happened, like I would be working on a song. And I remember the first time he came up with some lyrics and handed them to me and said, "This just came to me and I wonder what you think about it." And I thought, oh God, here we go. What if I don't like them? And,
Yeah.
but then I would read them and they were good. It was a good idea and a good, yeah. And come to find out, he was a pretty good lyricist. And
That's like
so
a miracle. That's awesome.
right. And I would look at his lyrics, and the way the process went was he would come up with some stuff and he would just kind of write stuff like as if he were talking to you almost. He wasn't trying to form stuff, verses or anything yet. He would just give me the crude original ideas, and then I would take and like do some editing and put my print on it, and then I would arrange it into verses and a refrain, and then write a melody. And we ended up with I thought, some pretty good songs that way.
That's cool. It's a very interesting way for a relationship to evolve that I would not have
Yeah,
expected.
it's not without its challenges,
Of course.
because we work together
Yeah.
and we're married, and you know, we still get questions all the time like, "Tom's your manager and you're married? Wow. I don't know what you were thinking, how is that working?" Like,
Man, you get a lot of judgment in your interviews. Goodness.
I know.
That's a lot. And it's not even about the music.
My
It's
personal
yeah, it's
life.
oddly very personal.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. Yeah. Well,
I
you
don't
know
like
how human
I do.
beings are, certainly flawed characters.
Yes, always in process.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand what they mean, so I try to be, open to their comments or, whatever. But yeah, it pisses me off sometimes, you
I could
know.
understand. It's again, it's not about the work, right? Then it's about something else, and
Yeah,
that's your life.
it's probably something that they're afraid of,
Yeah, yeah,
you know.
that's fair. Okay, last question. Is there a song you most enjoy to play live, and how much do you change it venue to venue?
And how much do I, what?
Change it venue to venue. Do you tweak it as you
Oh,
go, or do you play it faithfully every time?
yeah. Well, probably one of the main ones would be the song Joy. And I love doing that one because everybody loves it. It never gets, it never feels, it always feels fresh. It never feels dated because there's always going to be some joy we want and need. Everybody can relate to it. It doesn't have to be a love thing. In fact, Tom read me this thing today that the mayor of Nashville gave a speech. I guess it was yesterday or something, that last couple of days, where he quoted my song Joy. He said, brought my name up and said, Lucinda Williams, a local artist here in Nashville. She wrote this great song called Joy. And he said, and he then said a line from it, you took my joy, I want it back. And because he's blue, So he said, well, I could say, I want my joy. You took my joy and I want it back, and everybody else does too, or something like that. Like we all need our joy
Yeah,
back.
yeah. That's
I
cool.
love, isn't that great?
That's cool. That is cool. I love that you're a
Yeah,
local artist in Nashville, not, Lucinda Williams.
right. Yeah.
That's very
Well,
sweet.
he said Lucinda Williams had said that I was,
Yeah.
uh, you know, in a Nashville based
Yes.
artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think most people probably would know, who
Oh,
who you
yeah.
are.
Right. Yeah. I know. I still, there's still that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's sweet, it's
Yeah.
kind of, I don't mind when that happens. Like I don't feel like I'm a household name yet necessarily,
I
but
think in a lot of households.
a lot of people say, "Oh yes, you are. You're like famous and all
Yeah.
this," and but it doesn't feel like that to me necessarily all the time.
I think that's good though, because those people that have to interface with fame all the time, it's very ugly and it's overwhelming. I think if you
I
get
know.
the upsides and not the downsides, awesome.
I'm glad I didn't. That didn't happen with me at an earlier age.
Yeah. It's very hard. And I think there's a lot of stuff you can't be prepared for that happens.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I understand.
yeah. So it seems like everything happened for you in a very good order.
Yeah, and I like to think I have my head on my shoulders.
You seem like you've always had your head on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And you've had a lot of, you had a lot of hardships. You had a lot of stuff. And you sort of, there's this one line in your book where you're like, it was really hard for a kid and it was really chaotic, but, I didn't know it at the time. So I just kept
Right,
going. It was something along those lines. And I was like, yeah, that seems about right, where you just sort of rolled with it,
right. I
you
think
know?
well, I think kids are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. That you have to learn resilience as a kid.
Yeah.
When I mean your parents fighting, splitting up, moving from house to house or town to town. A lot of kids go through that and they're okay.
Yeah.
You know, I used to not like it when I would hear that, couples would stay together for the sake of the kids.
Yeah.
I was always like, please don't do that. Just go ahead, and the kids don't want you to be together. And if you're going to be yelling and fighting constantly,
Yeah.
like do them a favor and move on.
Yeah. I agree with you completely, because I also think, like, what are you modeling for love then? Like, you're saying
Right,
this is what love is, and it's like, well, that's a terrible lesson. That's not what anyone needs
right.
to walk away with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything I can do for you? Because this has been such a wonderful delight, and
It's
I'm so grateful.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. And I always say that when I do interviews with someone, I like to feel like I'm talking to a friend rather than like it doesn't feel like I'm doing an interview.
Yeah.
It feels more like, and that's a testament to the person who's talking to me, asking the questions.
I grew up listening to you. So you have a
Wow.
very singular place in my memories, like you're part of, my sort of familial experience in that way. And so it felt like such a wonderful gift to get to talk to you about your work, but also just to get to have this exchange with you. So I'm very, very grateful, and it's been such a very rare and
Thank
lovely
you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I've really appreciated your questions and,
Thank you.
you know, you've obviously done your homework,
I try.
which is gratifying and, great when that happens because it doesn't always happen. You'd be surprised maybe at some of the questions I'll get asked, sometimes from younger
People.
music journalists who, don't have the experience. They'll ask me things like, what comes first, the lyrics or the music? And this is always a good one. Do you think your father, as a poet, inspired you as a songwriter?
Yeah.
No. I mean, yes,
Of course.
you know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's much better when it's a give and take
Yeah.
um, conversation
Yes.
like this.
But you're also fun. You're fun to talk to.
Thanks.
I
You
enjoy
are
it.
too.
Thank you. All right. Well, hopefully I will see you in the not too far distant future. I will reach out to Jim. And again, just, it's meant the world. And I'm really so grateful I got to have this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. And you're welcome.
All right. Have a
And
wonderful day.
thank you. Peace and love.
Peace and love, Lucinda. Thank
Don't
you.
give up the fight.
I can't. I
The
can't and I
people
won't.
have the power, to quote Patti Smith.
Yeah. Very true. All right. Have a wonderful night. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.